Employers of Reddit, what is something that an employee did that resulted in immediate termination due to sheer unprofessionalism? Had an employee named Ernie call in Monday morning saying his dad died over the weekend. I told to take all the time he needed. Tuesday was the viewing, Wednesday was the funeral. Who shows up Wednesday? Ernie's dad. Ernie forgot his lunch. True story. Years ago when I worked at Home Depot, a couple idiots got fired for conducting a transaction involving a bag of weed, one buying it from the other, inside the store, instead of, going outside to the huge vacant lot next to the store. Here I've got a good one. So I helped run a 300-room hotel by the airport. People often come in and pay a monthly parking fee to keep their cars at our hotel during trips. One day we have a customer come back from their trip. They hand us the ticket and we go up to the lot to find it. No car. Maybe we got the spot wrong, so we search the entire complex. No car. Me and the other manager go take a look at the cameras and you'd never guess what we find. Not only has our youngest valet taken their car, which was a BMW by the way, this freaking valet has been using it to get to and from work since the customers left on their trip 2 weeks ago. So once we realize this, the customers are standing right out front filing a police report. Guess who shows up to work? Driving the guest's freaking car. Pulls up right in front of them and the cop to go clock and arrested and fired on the spot. Worked at a large liquor store warehouse in Rhode Island. An old guy who worked as a stock boy in the huge walk-in cooler got crap-faced while stocking. Ended up crapping his pants. Went to bathroom, took off his crap-filled boxers and put them up in the drop ceiling. He was fired that day for getting drunk at work. But the crap-filled boxer shorts were not found for like 3 or 4 days after the smell persisted with no obvious source. Unless somebody crapped their pants and panicked and hid them when they were found. Just blame the drunk guy who got fired recently. Sold his company laptop with all our source code to a pawn shop in Vegas during a convention for drug money. Supervisor in a customer service call center. One of my agents hands me an account number and says the lady wants me to know whoever she spoke to the night before was rude. Now, normally I would pass this off to the offending agent's supervisor and move on. Instead, I pull up the call and this caller was surprisingly chill for exactly how rude this employee was. I decided to pull a sampling of about 15 calls over the previous 2 weeks, concentrating on short calls and calls close to the end of his shift. I was livid by the time I was done. Some examples. Him to a caller: where are you located? Isn't that the East Coast? Why are you calling so late to do this? Call back tomorrow. This was 30 minutes before close. Would have been a 10-minute call, tops. Another caller was attempting to verify their account and he kept yelling "listen to them" over and over at escalating volume until the caller hung up. This was for absolutely no apparent reason. He asked another caller why they were bothering to get a certain type of phone for someone who couldn't even figure out how to activate their own phone. He would hang up on anyone who was calling just before closing time. This is the first time in my career where I have personally called multiple customers to apologize for their experience. Every single one said they had been shocked but not bothered to complain. Some even had orders to port out their numbers since their interaction. Usually we have to write someone up, get HR to approve it, set up an improvement plan. Not this guy. He was brought directly into HR, asked about the calls and just sat there, stone-faced. He was termed that day. I was legitimately nervous leaving work for a few months. He was spotted lurking a few times but nothing ever happened. I managed a liquor store and worked the Sunday busy shift all day myself, because it was very high volume of customers and higher chance of theft happening. I had the storeroom set out so I could access high selling products easily and restock shelves quickly. Every Monday another shift worker would rearrange the storeroom how she thought it should be. After asking her not to keep changing the layout, she plainly told me to frick off. I fired her on the spot. She phoned up the owner to complain and the owner told her to frick off. The lesson here is don't frick with the guy the boss trusts to run the busiest days solo. I work for an insurance company. One of our sales agents told a guy, "Hey, go frick yourself," when the guy told him he didn't want to pay whatever his premium quote was. He got fired and walked out. My company is really cool in that we aren't scripted, but we do draw the line at swearing at policy holders. Done. New employee struck up a conversation with his female supervisor about golf. She had no interest in sports. While going through his orientation packet, he kept bringing up the game. We just thought he was strange. After lunch, he told the group of us running the class that he had been working on his stroke. Pulled up a video on his phone of him stroking his dong in the store bathroom to trick show us. Kudos on the build up. Horrible punchline. Worked at a country club. Huge outing with hundreds of people. One of the caddies gets in a fight with another caddy and yells "I mark out you be" and pulls out a blade. That was his last loop. The poor people were supposed to do that in the basement where the rich could place bets, not in the open. Once upon a time, we were taking donations for the neonatal intensive care unit. A gentleman I worked with asked a customer if he wanted to make a donation, and the customer declined. The employee said, "Okay, I'll just write down here that you hate dying babies." The customer wasn't happy. He was fired shortly after. God dang, I hate stores asking me to donate money to their charities. Just let me buy my hot fries in peace. Sharon. I know it's not Sharon's fault, and I never take my annoyance out on the employee asking, but the obvious attempts at corporate tax write-off gets under my skin. Somehow took bolt cutters out of the security office and cut open the locks on the lockers of 2 co-workers. Caught on camera. The kicker? He had his 2 weeks notice and his last day was that week. He would have received an 80-hour cash out of his remaining paid time off and been eligible for rehire. Instead, he was fired at the start of his last shift. Managed a certain gaming retail store. Had to hire this one girl who was the daughter of one of the store manager's friends. She was absolutely worthless as a worker, wouldn't listen or do any tasks she was given. She was closing with me one night. As we closed the store, I was counting the register and told her to take out the garbage. She looked at me and said, "That's gross." No way. At first I thought she was just afraid to go outside alone. So then I asked if she would vacuum the store. She leaned back on the counter, said "I don't vacuum" and started messing around on her phone. I had enough at that point. I told her she could pack up and leave. She asked if she could look at next week's schedule. I told her not to worry about it, and that her shifts would be taken care of. My company put people up in hotel rooms when it was snowing pretty badly, with of course the expectation you would work the following day cause they knew it would be busy. One guy was somehow angry about that and decided to take a poo in his hotel room's bathroom sink. He got fired and we got banned from the hotel. Employee finished training for part-time work. She received her schedule and immediately accused our store manager of lying to her. She claimed she was promised full-time, when our SM informed her that she was not, and that we didn't hire full-time for this position. She looked him in the eye and says, "You need to clock out so we can go outside and talk about this." She then starts rolling up her sleeves. My manager was less than impressed. He told her to leave and that we'd call the cops if she returned. During induction on day 1, each new hire had to spend some time with every department to see what they did. New employee was more interested in talking about the problems she had with her son than learning about work. Turns out the bottle of Sprite she had been swigging from all day contained more gin than Sprite. Gave a guy a raise one day, title as warehouse manager. His job functions did not really change, and he had supervisor control over one part-time helper. It was a small place to work. He then proceeded to tell all 8 of his co-workers that he was paid more than them, and he told each one exactly how much because he got escalated computer privileges, and payroll was accessible via check ledger. Quickly fixed oops, and then he said that he was planning on rolling in around 10 and leaving at 4, taking 2-hour lunches. He went on at length how he was way more important than they were, etc. etc. It was a total Jekyll Hyde transformation the likes I had never seen before or since. The power rush to this guy's head for $50 more per week and a modest title change was amazing. All in 24 hours. Then he was fired. I was in stunned disbelief that I had to fire him. I went to pick up some parts from a supplier. Supplier, how is your day going? Me, you wouldn't believe it. I gave a guy a raise yesterday. Supplier, and you had to fire him today, right? Me, how did you know? Supplier, I have been doing this 40 years. Some people are crazy when they get a tiny bit of power. It happens. It's like he turned into the sort of person that runs a homeowner association. Discretion, no matter how skilled an employee is, discretion can be the difference between continued employment and merit increases and unemployment. Director of brewing ops here. Hired a dude who claimed 3 years professional brewing experience on his resume. About 2 months in, training him to run our brew house, where the beer gets made before it's fermented. As part of the process, boiling water is cycled through the system to clean it. Guy almost opened 2 different valves doing this, both aimed directly at this crotch. Would have resulted in him getting literally 300 plus gallons of boiling water poured onto his dong. Tried to have a talk with him later that day about why he did that, how to make sure he didn't do it again. Dude slammed his fists on the table, yelled, "That's bulls, you told me wrong at the start of convo." Fired the next morning. I wouldn't hire that guy to run the fryer at McDonald's. Too likely to dip a hand in to grab a loose nugget. Restaurant GM came with the idea to have employees do an anonymous survey. Most replies were about how much the GM was a bully. Fired. His own idea got him fired. That and he was a power-hungry frick chop. That's pretty satisfying. My supervisor punched another manager because he forgot to process his fantasy football transfer requests in time. My workload increased considerably that day. Fun times. As the commissioner, that is very unprofessional. One guy was late 23 fricking times in a 2-month period. Hadn't even been there a full 3 months. Instead of firing him, management suspended him for a week. This idiot calls corporate and tells them that he's been treated unfairly, so the store manager and his department manager have to have a meeting with him, and he shows up 15 minutes late to the meeting. When he finally showed up, they just fired him. A guy at my warehouse job asked another if he had visited the capital of Thailand. The victim, confused, replied number and was then slapped on the dong by the other guy. That ball slapper got fired quicker than the guy who broke out coke on our smoke break. Best worst college job I ever had. Bangkok. My sister owned a restaurant. It had security cameras mounted outside the delivery door on the backside of the building. I worked for her doing the books and alcohol inventory. Around 7:30, 8 o'clock the prep crew comes in to prep for lunch, as well as me, a chef and a waitress. I'm sitting in the basement office, computering away, when all of a sudden, the waitress comes flying in with one of the chef's a horrified look on her face. She said she was out on the patio and heard a noise, so she looked around the wall and found one of the prep cooks slapping his salami in the corner by the delivery door. We quickly flipped on the security camera and sure enough, this poor kid is in the corner behind the restaurant absolutely beating himself like a drum. We all laugh hysterically and wait for him to finish. When he came back in, he washed his hands and then was asked to come to the office. Guess who got fired for spanking it at work? Poor kid. He was mortified and started crying. It was quite embarrassing for all of us. When he came back in, he washed his hands. Hey, at least he washed his hands. Worked as an assistant manager at an electronics store and had one employee pull a prank on a third key. Her mom used to be the manager, so she thought she was untouchable. Third key didn't appreciate it, so I brought her into the back and she refused to apologize and was hostile the entire conversation. So I sent her home. On the way out she threatened to see said employee in the parking lot at close, making a fist at him. I called her back into the store and told her she no longer worked with us. I worked in a cinema and there was this student who helped out as a projectionist during his time off school. Apparently, he used to sneak his friends inside the projection room so they could watch the movie for free from there. One day, he called in sick but his friends came anyway, and because the guy wasn't at work, they simply asked his boss if they can watch the movie upstairs again. Our boss called and fired him while his friends were still standing in front of us. I know somebody who got fired as a projectionist because they thought it would be funny to intermittently draw lines on the film with Sharpie as it was feeding into the projector so that the audience would occasionally see a dark line in the middle of the picture. When I worked in dentistry, a fellow nurse was a bit of a liability. She ended up treating an old school acquaintance, read enemy, and decided to disclose the patient's medical history to their mutual school friends. Massive complaint. Nurse fired, and rightly so. Was a supervisor at a tech support call center. Center had group chats for each team where agents could talk among themselves, mainly to ask questions or for help while on a call. Most of the subs including myself, were pretty lax with it and let the teams hold conversations as long as they weren't overly distracting, kept SFW, and legit questions got answered first. All was good until I got an agent on my team who at one point proceeded to post racial jokes in our team chat that we happened to be sharing with another team. I shut down the chat, opened another work only and pulled that agent into the write-up room. Intended to just talk with him about it, and the punishment was going to be a write-up in 1 week without chat access. His first reply to me, in front of another sup witness, was, "Who's the b-but-p that complained it was me?" I look at the other supervisor and we both just walked out of the room without a word. I walked down to HR and got approval to terminate within 5 minutes. A very vocally disgruntled agent was then walked out of the building within 10 minutes from then. There was this one customer, he refused to help. He always called someone else. One day no one could stop what they were doing, so he had to take a dollar bill from said customer. He laid it flat on the counter and sprayed it on both sides with Lysol until there was a literal puddle on the desk as the customer stood there waiting for his change. That was the final straw with that one. Bartender I know served free drinks and hit on a group 2 girls while ignoring the rest of the restaurant. He tried to get them to go to a club with him when he was off and do blow. Probably wouldn't have been too quick to fire him if the girls weren't secret shoppers. Young guy on his first day left during his 20-minute break and didn't come back until almost 3 hours later. When questioned, he said, "My friends invited me to breakfast, so he went out to a restaurant to have breakfast with them and came back to work after. He was told he can't do that, you only get 20 minutes. He said, "Oh sorry, this is my first job I've ever had." The next day he disappears after first break again and comes back about 2-3 hours later and says he went out for breakfast with his friends again like it was no big deal. Fired on the spot. Edit. To clear things up for some people, the 20 minutes was for the first break of the day. We had another break later that was 30 minutes long, a total of 50 minutes of break in an 8-hour shift. 30 minutes is a legal requirement here in Ontario for a period of 8 working hours. The actual law states that workers cannot work for 5 hours without 30 minutes of break to eat. Therefore most companies will make that break happen at a time, so when it's over there are less than 5 hours left in the shift. By doing this they can legally only let employees have 30 minutes total because of the loophole of not having another 5 hours worked consecutively. It's pretty crappy of most places to do, but it does not break the law to do this. Really nice for being understanding for the first time. People can be very clueless about obvious things sometimes, so I think explaining that was not okay and letting him have a second chance was super nice. Openly did coke at a company party. No one cares if you do coke. Just go to the bathroom, so we have plausible deniability. We had a guy who worked with us who had brain damage. Management let him get away with a lot out of fear of a lawsuit. Mainly, he liked bragging about how many girls' asses he'd touched. He'd apparently just walk up to girls in public and grab their butts, then come into work and brag about it. While it's kinda skeevy, you can't exactly fire someone for that. I also heard him bragging about something he did on Tinder once, but I didn't hear the whole thing. I wouldn't be surprised in the least if he was bragging about sending girls dong pics, though. Anyway, what got him fired instantly was when he started hitting on a girl at work. She told him no, so he threw a stapler at her head. Instant termination. Bragging about sexual harassment definitely falls under the can be fired for list, even if it's not happening at work. Talking about it openly could easily be considered as creating a hostile work environment, as it could easily be overheard as making sexual remarks. A girl in the gas station I work at was fired for punching a customer who was trying to steal a Snickers. She made up this bull's story about how he spit on her or something, but the cameras caught everything. Apparently he was an older man on crutches. The CEO of the company got the video and she was fired instantly. I worked at a tourist attraction and we had a small shop that made and sold fudge. Well, one of the girls that worked in fudge stole a whole duffel bag of fudge. She was fired the next morning. Thanks to you, I now have duffel bag of fudge as a concept, and it will stick with me for all of time. At a small startup, we found that one of our junior developers had a Twitter account where he tweeted all day long about how much the company sucked and how unfair it was that we were making him fix bugs in the software. Found the account at 5 PM and he was crap canned before he could even make it back into the office the next morning. A server got caught ripping off people with $3 off coupons. He went to a paper machine, stole all the papers to get the $3 off coupons and was able to pocket the $3 on cash customers. What he did not know was the coupons are numbered and all of his that he turned in were in sequential order. Summer job when I was in high school. I was a lifeguard at a country club. Some hotshot all-state swimmer worked with me and acted like he owned the place. He never did anything other than check out the women who came to the pool. We guarded on rotation and it was now his turn to be in the high chair. Not too long after, a little girl almost drowned cause Phelps up there fell asleep. Fired immediately. She didn't want to help me do the store windows displays because she could break a nail doing it. I thought she was kidding but no, she was dead serious. She was mad at me for firing her. She didn't showed up for work, didn't call or anything. She was mad at me for firing her. She stole from the store. Yes, she was also mad at me for firing her. He spit on the floor. Inside. I wasn't the one who fired him but he was still mad at me for not defending him. It's like living in the Twilight Zone. Who raised those people? Not an employer, but a sort of manager. I worked at a large mechanic shop as a glorified janitor in college. I worked cleaning stuff or refurbishing old parts, but sometimes turned wrenches as a mechanic when it got busy. One summer got really busy, so I was being a mechanic more than cleaning and the place went to crap. To make up for it, my boss hired some high school kids and had me train them. Easy peasy. After that, I was supposed to dole out a chores list every morning to them. One kid was lazy, and my boss knew it, so he told me to give him the harder chores, to break him in, which actually is how I go good at my job in the first place. A chore that needed done one day was to weed whack the property, which was rather large. It was most definitely the hardest chore that day. Told the kid to it, and he went off. An hour later, one of the other kids approached me and said the lazy kid tried to pawn off his task to him because he didn't want to do it because he was above the other new hires. Boss didn't take too kindly to that and fired him on the spot. I held a temp agency job to put up some warehouse shelves. They asked me to weed whack their whole property, about 4 acres. I did it but it took about 3 hours. The guy I was reporting to handed me a $50 cash bonus on the spot for doing it without complaining. I was cajoled and convinced to hire my then GF's sister's boyfriend to help out in my old business refurbishing buildings. It was just 2 weeks work, so I hired him. What's the worst that could happen? All he had to do was fetch and carry tools, and certain bits of product. Nothing heavy, nothing tricky. Just fetch me that hammer, get the ladders, see that timber, put it on the trestle so I can cut it, etc. By the third day it had all got on top of him. Fetching hammers is tricky work, obviously, so he decided to go to a house near where we were working and get out of his head on drugs and drink. I hadn't seen him for a bit, so I go look for him and find him with his eyes going in seemingly different directions, sitting on an armchair with powder on his nose, some weed in one hand and a can of beer in the other. He was off his freaking head. I sacked him, but I even tried to help him by saying to tell everyone that the company decided we didn't need an extra guy anymore. However, this was not good enough. So he told his GF I just didn't like him and had fired him for no reason. She then got onto her parents. I then had my GF, her sister, and their parents all giving me crap. This berating quickly stopped once I flipped my crap and told them what really happened. Congratulations. Now not only did he prove he was a slacker, he also looked a drunken druggie who had to lie to cover it all up. I have no idea what he thought would come of it. Idiot. Never hire friends or family. Always take a pic. We have video recorders and download the violation onto a stick drive for unemployment requests for benefits. Sounds like yours is a smaller business, but it can save you from lawsuits as well. You might scroll to the bottom of the comments for an unusual term we had that I posted. Cameras unfortunately only recorded the truck. I worked in a call center. One guy was particularly salty one day and left while telling a buddy he was going to burn the place down one day. Someone else overheard him, and he was gone the next day. I wasn't actually around for this, but I heard all about it. A guy at a car dealership I used to work at got a promotion that he probably wasn't ready for, and the stress was getting to him. One day he approached the service manager about getting something done quickly for a vehicle that just sold. When the manager told him that they were too busy to fit it in that day, he snapped and grabbed him by the throat. Took 2 guys to pull him off. He got sent home for the rest of the day, and in the morning, he came in for just long enough to clear out his office. Apparently he is at another dealer and doing much better now. Was a manager at a sales call center. Girl would have 2 headsets on, one for work and the other for her unemployed GF that wanted to talk to her all the time to make sure she wasn't at work cheating on her. Funny thing is, she got fired for watching movie trailers on her computer, which was right in front of a security camera. When I was a manager in a call center in my late teens, I walked past a member of staff smoking weed with his mates outside the office. I wouldn't have minded. It was sort of the done thing in that place, but the thing was he'd called in sick that day, and when I walked past him he said that if I told anyone he'd frick me up. So I sacked him. Edit. RIP inbox. Lots of people asking for more info or calling bulls on me being a manager in my teens. This was a real cowboy operation. Cold calling, selling telecoms to businesses in South Wales. I started working there at 17 and was there 6 months before being promoted to telesales manager. I was inexplicably good at my job, so I think they just wanted to keep hold of me. This company would get 10-15 new starts every Monday, with the expectation that 2-5 of them were still working there by Friday, then repeat the process on Monday. In hindsight, I think it must have been some sort of money laundering scam. The MD would come to the office once every couple of months and take the managers out to get drunk and do a lot of C. He was also much more interested in getting new staff through the door than actual sales or income. I left after about 18 months to go to uni, and the business disappeared shortly after. When this incident happened, I went back upstairs and had a good laugh about it with the other managers. They asked why I didn't sack him there and then, and I responded that I didn't think it was in my job role. They handed me the phone and told me to call him and tell him not to come back. We put it on speakerphone and could hear his mates laughing in the background. He called me a C and hung up on me. Never saw him again. Oh, easy. 10th grade teacher. Testing new hires in a classroom setting. Wednesday was a guy I already wasn't a big fan of. He spent a lot of time trying to be the cool guy who doesn't care, asking about how many vacation days he has and when he can take them in the days immediately following getting his job, making fun of the teachers who dress formally for their job. Newsflash bud, we have a dress code as well, and just a general nonchalance that was totally inappropriate. So this hire is having his classroom day, and he writes something on a piece of scrap paper and slides it onto a student's desk with his back turned, thinking I didn't see. I thought maybe he was trying to tell her something without embarrassing her, like maybe she had her fly down, had started her period, or even was just working from the wrong chapter of the book. I took him aside rather than calling him out in case that was the situation. I said, "What did you just hand to that student?" point blank, without skipping a beat. My cell phone number. I walked right back in there and got the paper from the confused and uncomfortable looking girl to verify this, and sure enough, he had, with a smiley face. I asked him what gave him the nerve and he said, "Come on man, this is high school. You've been there, right? One look and you know she's way past puberty. If there's grass on the infield, play ball." We filed a police report and sent him packing. Worked at a daycare. Employee told 4-year-old, "Get your hands off your pee," in front of the district manager. You have been spotted by the rare flying floofer. If you comment "good boy" below, he don't steal your hot dogs anymore. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.